Hi guys and Happy New Year! I am so excited to bring to you today my first video of 2018, which is looking back to last year and my favourite books of 2017. It's my favourite video to film every single year. I love my favourite books video. I love getting to talk about all the books I've really loved, and this year is no different. A lot of booktubers will probably make you wait to the end of the video to hear their top 3 books, but I'm not going to do that because I know there's going to be some of you watching it who will click away, and I really want to talk to you about my top 2 books of the year. So I'm going to talk about them first. And my favourite book of the year in 2017 was an all-time favourite. I'm really sorry to say that Wuthering Heights has been ousted from the top spot as my favourite book, and there's a new book in town, and that is Shirley by Charlotte Brontë. I absolutely adored this book. It's most definitely my favourite book of all time now. I was a bit reluctant at first to call this my favourite book because that's a really big statement. It's something that I don't take lightly at all, but as soon as I read it I knew that this was just simply the best book I've ever read. In terms of the writing, in terms of the characters, in terms of the themes, I love this book so much. We're going to be reading this in September and October for the Brontë Book Club. I'll leave the links in the description to that where you can join in for the next year, so I'm really looking forward to seeing lots more of you reading this too. But basically Shirley is about 2 girls called Caroline Helston and Shirley Kilder, who are pretty much polar opposites of each other. Caroline is quite shy, quite understated, she does what she's told, she acts in a very conventional Victorian manner, and Shirley is the complete opposite of that. Shirley was actually a male name before Shirley was released, but in the book Shirley was named Shirley because she was gonna be a boy, then she turned out to be a girl, but they gave her the name anyway. And that really sums up who Shirley is. In fact, at some points in the book she calls herself Captain Kilder, and she is a female in a very male-dominated world. In this world where the Luddite uprisings are happening, where technology was taking over in the Industrial Revolution and workers weren't needed, so they were destroying equipment and technology, and Shirley comes along and she's part of this mill and she bosses the male characters about, she takes over, she won't stand any messing whatsoever, and that is why I love her so much. Whenever I've read any academic articles about Shirley or heard anybody from quite an academic background talking about it, they always talk about how boring it is and how it's not very complicated, but I think that that's what makes it so good. A bit like Thomas Hardy, where his books ambles along at a really easy pace, that's what Shirley is like, and I liked this more than Jane Eyre because I found that the third person narration in this was a lot better. It means that Charlotte can talk a lot more about the landscape and the place that she's writing about rather than being in the characters' heads the whole time. I love Caroline, I love Shirley, and I'm on a one-woman mission to convince everybody to read Shirley in 2018. Then my favourite YA book of 2017 was most definitely When Dimple Met Rishi by Sandia Menon. I loved this book so much. It was so cute and sweet and portrayed this YA romance that doesn't fall into really cliched tropes, which I loved about it. This is about 2 characters called, surprise surprise, Dimple and Rishi, and they go to a school during the summer that is all about technology and building your own app, and I loved Dimple and her enthusiasm for technology because you don't see that a lot in books. I think encouraging female STEM is really important and encouraging girls to go into science and technology, and so I'm loving YA books about that. This really is the cutest book, and for a debut it is simply outstanding, and I can't wait to see what she writes next. She's got a new book coming out this year which is called From Twinkle with Love, and then another book in the future which is a kind of prequel to When Dimple Met Rishi, and I'm so pleased because I can't get enough of these characters and the worlds that she creates. On to more classics, and I am so happy that I read Far From the Madding Crowd in 2017. It's not just one of my favourite books now, it's also one of my favourite films because I also watched the most recent adaptation of this, starring Carey Mulligan, which I talk about a lot in relation to this because it's such a faithful adaptation, so beautifully done, and the screenplay written by David Nichols is outstanding. It's one of the best adaptations of any book I've ever watched. Thomas Hardy is one of my favourite authors, and I think this is a great place to start if you haven't read anything by him before. It's definitely one of his more light-hearted novels about a woman called Bathsheba Everdeen who inherits a farm and has lots of suitors and is expected to marry because, like Shirley, she's in a position of power, and I think that I've read a lot of Victorian classics this year with women in power. That's an amazing thing to read. I've loved finding books like it because this image we get get of the Victorian lady is of this woman who sits down all day in this long skirt and doesn't do anything and runs a household. And there are definitely women out there that have been written about that are not like that at all. Shirley is one of them, Bathsheba is one of them, and Bathsheba is really interesting. I've talked about this before because she makes a lot of mistakes. She makes a lot of wrong decisions, goes down the wrong path, but in the end we see that she owns up to that and realises that she's made a mistake. And it's also about how Victorian women only need to make one mistake and that is their lives pretty much ruined. And I like how Thomas Hardy discusses that, but it's also not a tragedy as with some of Thomas Hardy's other books. I love him. He's my babe. I love Thomas Hardy. Then another classic that I really loved was one I was really excited to read in 2017 and I was not disappointed. I read this for Victober and it is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Again, North and South is very similar to Shirley. It's got a very similar background, this kind of industrialisation setting. It's set up north during the time of the Industrial Revolution and follows these wealthy characters and poorer characters too, and I liked the difference between that. I can't wait to read more Elizabeth Gaskell in 2018. I feel like I'm going to really love more of her books. Something I really got into in 2017 was nature writing, and there were two books that really stood out for me. The first being Landmarks by Robert Macfarlane. I loved this. It's pretty much a dictionary of lots of words that are from all over the British Isles that we don't really use anymore, or if we do, we don't realise what they mean. They could be hidden in place names and things like that, and they are all relating to different parts of the landscape. Robert Macfarlane's writing is definitely my favourite find of 2017. I'm so excited to read the rest of his books because I know that I'm going to love them just as much, but I'm saving them for spring because I feel like that's the best time to read them. I also love this because I found lots of book recommendations from it because each chapter is dedicated to a different writer, such as Nan Shepherd and Roger Deacon, who I'm really looking forward to reading this year as well. And then the other nature writing book I really loved in 2017 was The Outrun by Amy Liptrot. Again, another writer I'm really glad that I found last year. This details Amy's struggle with alcohol addiction, but at no point during the book does she trivialise or glamorise it. It's written very factually as it was in these sometimes very shocking events, but counteracted by the way that she escapes into nature and uses nature and the landscape to help her with her recovery. I loved reading about Orkney, where she was born and grew up and then went back to, and I don't really know a lot about it, so it was really nice to read about it. And I've heard that because people have been reading this, they've then gone on pilgrimages to Orkney, almost like it's a tourist hotspot now that people have read this book. And I do think that it's one of those books that you need to read to find out how good it is, so I'd really recommend that you read it. And then another YA book I read and loved in 2017 was The Start of Me and You by Emery Lord. This was really cute and sweet. That's how I like my contemporaries, and it's very geeky too, which I really love. Obviously I'm a big nerd, so I love books with characters who embrace what they're passionate about and aren't ashamed of it. It talks about quizzing, and there's a really lovely romance, and it's set in a literature class. The premise of this is really good because it's about a girl called Paige whose boyfriend has died, but instead of being this overly dramatic book where everybody dies and it's really sad and you're supposed to cry, what happens to Paige is that his death really impacts her because they weren't together long, and so everyone looks at her pityingly and expects her to be really sad. But really she just feels sad that he died and not because she was with him. And so that's what really has an effect on Paige. I'm getting quite fed up of death in YA because I feel like so much of it happens and it's not done to a standard that I really think is realistic. But The Start of Me and You was definitely realistic, and I really would recommend that you read it. And then my final favourite book of 2017 was Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I read and loved Six of Crows in 2016 and then read this right at the start of 2017, so it's testament to the book that it stood a whole year being one of my favourite books, because it's been pretty much a year now when I'm filming this since I read it, but it has not diminished in my eyes at all, and I just really want to convince everybody to read this duology because Leigh Bardugo creates this amazing world with amazing characters, and I love it. It's amazing. So that was my favourite books of 2017 list. Let me know if you've read and loved any of these, and also let me know in the comments your favourite books of 2017 because I would love to know. So here is to an amazing year of videos on Lucy the Reader in 2018. There are lots more coming up that I'm very excited about. I'm very excited to film, so we shall see what happens. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. Happy reading!